Today, we're diving into the 2010 cult classic Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, a movie packed with epic fights, video game logic, and relationship drama turned into literal boss battles. We meet Scott Pilgrim, an awkward yet oddly confident 22-year-old bassist, hanging out with his friends when he casually drops a bombshell. He's dating a 17-year-old high schooler named Knives. His friends immediately grill him, asking if they've done it, to which Scott innocently responds, "Oh, we've done tons of things." Knives joins Scott's band, Sex Bob Omb, for practice. She meets the gang, Kim, the unimpressed drummer, Steven, the ambitious lead singer, and young Neil, who doesn't play anything in the band plays, and Knives absolutely loses her mind over it. Scott? He's just vibing. Later, Scott heads home to his one-bedroom with no privacy apartment, which he shares with his sharp-tongued, no-nonsense roommate, Wallace. Wallace, being the ultimate snitch, immediately tells Scott's sister about Knives, and she calls to tell him the obvious. Dating a high schooler is a bad idea. Yeah, Scott definitely saw that coming. The next day, Scott picks Knives up from school, and they hit up the arcade, where he flexes his deep-cut Pac-Man knowledge. They also browse through Goodwill and a record store, and on the way home, Knives nervously confesses she's never kissed a boy. Scott, being peak awkward, replies, "I haven't either." That night, Scott has a bizarre dream about a mysterious girl with wild purple hair. The next day, while at the library with Knives, he actually sees her in real life. Mind blown. Scott becomes obsessed and later spots her at a party where he attempts to flirt and fails spectacularly, so naturally, he just starts stalking her instead. Desperate for intel, he interrogates literally everyone at the party about her. The next morning, Scott checks his email and finds a message from some guy challenging him to a fight to the death. Sounds important. He deletes it. Meanwhile, Scott and Knives go on another date. But something's different. Now that Ramona's on his mind, Knives just isn't hitting the same. But instead of breaking up, Scott does what any emotionally unavailable guy would do. He avoids it. At band practice, Steven announces they've landed a big gig that could lead to a record deal. But Scott's distracted by yet another dream about Ramona. Except this time, when he wakes up, she's actually at his door, delivering a package. Seizing the opportunity, he awkwardly asks her out, and she agrees, but only if he signs for the package first. That night, they hang out, and Ramona even invites him over. They make out, but nothing more. The next night, Ramona shows up at Sex Bob Omb's gig, just as Knives greets Scott with a dramatic kiss. Panic mode activated. Scott, sweating bullets, immediately runs backstage, hoping the two don't meet. But before he can fully process his own mess, a guy literally flies in mid-song, declaring their battle has begun. Meet Matthew Patel, Ramona's first evil ex. He wastes no time unleashing an over-the-top Bollywood-style musical attack, but Scott isn't having it. One well-timed punch, and boom, Matthew explodes into a shower of coins. With the first round of the Battle of the Bands won, Scott and Ramona leave together. On the bus ride home, she casually drops the bombshell. If he wants to date her, he has to defeat all 7 of her evil exes. Scott, ever the optimist, completely ignores the danger and instead focuses on the fact that she just confirmed they're dating. The next morning, Scott returns home, bragging to Wallace that he got to second base, or maybe first and a half. Wallace congratulates him, but reminds him that he really needs to break up with Knives before things get worse. If not, Wallace will take matters into his own hands. Scott finally mans up, sort of, and meets up with Knives. She excitedly invites him to dinner for her birthday so he can meet her parents. Then, in the most poorly timed moment ever, she tells him she loves him. Scott's response? "Yeah, so we should break up." Ouch. That night, Ramona comes over for dinner, and afterward, the two take a stroll, leading them to a film set at a castle. Suddenly, a ridiculously cool, sunglasses-wearing action star steps out of a trailer. Meet Lucas Lee, another evil ex. Before they can leave, Lucas walks over to Scott and starts throwing punches. Scott gets back up, ready to fight, but Lucas has another trick up his sleeve. He unleashes an army of stunt doubles to take Scott down. One by one, Scott fights them off and finally faces Lucas himself. Realizing he can't win with brute force, Scott challenges Lucas to grind down the long staircase railing leading up to the castle. Lucas, ever the showman, accepts the challenge and executes a perfect grind until he reaches the end. The speed is too much, and he crashes hard. Scott wins. But just as he does, he notices Ramona has disappeared. The next day, he heads to a local coffee shop to talk to his sister. He spots Ramona. She apologizes for leaving, admitting she can be difficult to be around, and tells Scott she'd understand if he doesn't want to see her anymore. But Scott reassures her, of course he still wants to. That's when his ex, Envy Adams, makes a dramatic entrance. She invites Scott to see her band perform, where her boyfriend will be playing. Unlike Scott, she's already made it big in the music industry. Scott refuses, but she casually tells him he's already on the list. The next night, Steven comes in with exciting news. The band has scored a gig opening for a big artist. Scott immediately protests, but the band convinces him to go through with it for their sake. When they arrive at the venue, Scott spots Knives in the crowd. She's dyed her hair blue, just like Ramona's. To top it off, she's now dating young Neil in an attempt to make Scott jealous. After Sex Bob-omb finishes their set, Envy's band takes the stage, and there, playing guitar, is the guy she left Scott for, Todd. When Scott points him out, Ramona drops another bombshell. She knows Todd. In fact, he's one of her 7 evil exes. Scott, for once, throws the first punch at Todd, but Todd easily blocks it using his vegan powers and absolutely wrecks Scott in a one-sided fight. Scott, beaten and desperate, grabs a guitar and challenges Todd to a guitar battle, only to lose again. Scott then offers Todd a coffee, secretly switching his vegan drink with a regular one. The moment Todd takes a sip, the vegan police storm in, stripping him of his powers. Scott delivers the finishing blow with a headbutt, taking down yet another ex. Later, at a nightclub, Scott and Ramona get into an argument about how all of her exes seem to be terrible people. Just as Scott complains about her evil boyfriends, he's blindsided by a surprise attack from Roxy, Ramona's 4th ex. Roxy, however, isn't here for small talk. She goes straight for Ramona, and an intense fight breaks out. Scott realizes he has to be the one to defeat her, but instead of brute force, he takes advantage of a certain weak spot, the back of her knee. One touch, and well, let's just say, game over. Afterwards, Scott and Ramona get into another heated argument about her exes, with Scott frustrated at how chaotic they all are. Ramona, clearly fed up, tells him they should split up, saying he's just another evil ex in the making. She hands him a list of all 7 exes and walks off. The next 2 on the list? The Katayanagi twins, who, as it turns out, Ramona dated at the same time. Coincidentally, they're also Sex Bob-omb's final opponents in the Battle of the Bands. When the battle starts, the twins unleash a sonic wave so powerful it literally blows the roof off with just a single note. But Sex Bob-omb fights back, playing a brand new song until the twins take things up a notch and summon 2 massive dragons that nearly wipe them out. Just when it looks like it's over, Scott and his bandmates channel their music into a beast of their own, launching it straight at the dragons. The creatures clash in an epic showdown. Sex Bob-omb stands victorious. Scott rushes outside to talk to Ramona, but she shuts him down, saying they need to break up, because she's with Gideon now, the guy who not only created the entire band competition, but also the one pulling the strings behind the evil exes. Completely crushed, Scott quits the band, refusing to work for Gideon, and walks away, heartbroken. Back home, Scott gets a call from Gideon. He claims he feels bad about everything and invites Scott to his club. Still furious, Scott heads there, confronting Gideon and challenging him for Ramona's heart, because in his words, he's in love with her. At that moment, he gains the power of love, summoning a glowing, flaming sword. With it, he fights off Gideon's army of co-workers before taking Gideon on one-on-one. At first, Scott seems to have the upper hand, but Gideon quickly overpowers him. Just as he's about to finish Scott off, out of nowhere, Knives comes flying in and steals Gideon's sword. But instead of teaming up with Scott, she turns her fury on Ramona, blaming her for taking the guy who broke her heart. While Knives and Ramona sword fight in the background, Scott and Gideon go at it in a brutal fist fight. Scott manages to push Gideon back and tries to stop the girls from fighting, when suddenly, Gideon stabs him in the back. Everything fades to black. Scott wakes up in the same dreamlike place where he first saw Ramona. She tells him she wasn't looking for anything serious and apologizes for how things turned out. But then she hints that maybe she wasn't the one Scott was meant to fight for in the first place. That's when Scott sees something, a flashing extra life hovering nearby. He respawns back in his house. This time, Scott heads straight to Gideon's club, first making amends with the band before confronting Gideon again. But when Gideon asks if Scott wants to fight for Ramona, Scott shakes his head. No, he's fighting for himself. With that, he gains a new sword, the power of self-respect. The fight plays out just like before, except this time, when Scott lunges at Gideon, he slashes his arm with the sword, immediately taking him down. Knives charges at Ramona again, but Scott steps in, finally owning up to the truth. He was the one who hurt Knives. He cheated on both of them. Hearing this, Knives and Ramona back down, finally at peace, but Gideon isn't done yet. Now down an arm, he gets back up and goes for another round. Scott and Knives team up, but Gideon is relentless. He shatters Scott's sword, leaving him defenseless, until Ramona steps in, spins him around, and kicks him right where it hurts. Gideon stumbles back, then shoves Ramona aside, enraging Scott and Knives. They both rush him, delivering one final beatdown. Gideon, barely standing, tries one last insult, telling Scott he's not cool enough to be with Ramona. But Scott doesn't hesitate. He lands one last devastating hit, knocking Gideon out for good. Afterwards, Ramona tells Scott she's leaving town to start over. Knives, now finally over him, encourages Scott to go after her, admitting she's too cool for him anyway. So Scott chases after Ramona, catching up to her just in time. Together, they walk off into the unknown, leaving everything else behind. And that's how the story ends. Thanks for watching.